Thank you so much for joining. We're really thrilled to have had such good participation in our last webinar. This is Textile Renewal Alliance's second public webinar. It is also our last of the year before we submit our application for consideration to be California's textile producer responsibility organization, administering the state's textile extended producer responsibility law, pending approval from CalRecycle. So for those who may be new to Textile Renewal Alliance, or TRA, we are a prospective producer responsibility organization, or PRO. We'll refer to that interchangeably. And we were established by the California Retailers Association, the American Apparel and Footwear Association, the National Retail Federation, and their members earlier of this year. So before we jump into the presentation, I'd like to hand it over to one of our leaders, Rachel Michelin, who is CEO of the California Retailers Association, for a few introductory words. So Rachel, take it away, please.
Great. Thanks, Olivia. My name is Rachel Michelin. I'm the president and CEO for the California Retailers Association. We are the trade association representing the retail industry from small independent retailers to regional retailers to national brands before the California legislature, the governor's office, and over 25 regulatory boards in the state. We're really excited to be part of this project. CRA is involved in a number of different EPR programs in California, both current and ones that are being proposed. And what is so, I think, unique about this application and what we're trying to do here is that we're really looking at creating one of the largest, actually the largest textile EPR program in the planet. And with that, there's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of things that need to be done to build that infrastructure. At the same time, we're also, I think, being part of a whole new industry here, not only in California, but nationally when it comes to textile EPR and the reuse, repair, recycling of textiles. So we are hosting this, and we've, since I think our last one, we have launched with our name and our logo. We have our branding and our website, and we really are excited about what's going to happen in this new EPR program. We really want to focus in on our application around this statute and what was, CRA was involved in the negotiations of SB 707, and I'm proud of the fact that we, throughout the entire process, we really were supportive of the legislation and getting it to a point that was passed by the legislature and then signed by Governor Newsom and then brought us to where we are today. Really, our goal with this, with the Textile Renewal Alliance, is to make sure that the statute is implemented in the way that it was intended to by the legislature and the governor, to work collaboratively with CalRecycle through the rulemaking process, and then also make sure that we include and are very inclusive of all the unique perspectives in California and really pay tribute to the diversity of California. California is both geographically diverse and our population is diverse. And we want to make sure we create a program that's going to encompass all of the players in this field, work collaboratively to implement SB 707, and then really look towards the future of what this can look like going forward in terms of creating new green jobs in our state and also ensuring that the premise of 707 is met. So today you're going to meet some of our partners who are helping us in establishing this organization, some of our ideas that we're putting forward in our application. And I just want to make sure that all of you know, as the On the Ground Association in California, myself, my colleague Sarah is on this call, Polo, you can reach out to us at any time you have questions. We want to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table and that we're being inclusive of everyone's perspective. And we are extremely excited to be working with our partners at the National Retail Federation and the American Apparel and Footwear Association in leading this charge to making this the gold standard for EPR programs, not only here in California, but throughout the nation. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Olivia.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And we'll jump right into our content here. We've just got a few quick housekeeping items, starting with a legal disclaimer, if we can go forward. Nothing in this presentation should be construed as legal advice. We are providing information, and you should be seeking advice from your in-house or outside counsel if that's what you're looking for with regards to EPR implementation. So we'll just keep going from there. I mentioned at the beginning, you've probably seen the session will be recorded. This is so we can give this back to you as a reference, and so that others who were not able to join have the benefit of hearing the presentation. We will stop recording at Q&A, as we have found that encourages more open dialogue. Related to Q&A, I already see one question in there, so thank you so much for using that feature. Again, there's between Q&A and comment features, I think, or chat features, please use Q&A. That should be the only one enabled. We will try to get to as many questions as we can. We got through a lot last time. We often try and sort of consolidate questions where we see themes. So if yours isn't answered verbatim, do not despair. We're trying to get to all of them. And if for some reason we don't get to yours, if you submit the question under your name and not anonymously, we can go back and look at the registration and get back to you with a response. So just encourage you to not submit anonymously in the interest of getting a good response. We will send both a copy of this deck and this recording, as I mentioned, after the webinar, certainly before the end of the week. And we will also be posting it on our website. If you have any further questions beyond today's discussion, please feel free to reach out to us. I believe this was also dropped into the chat just now, but you can get to any of us at info@textilerenewal.org, and we will get back to you in a timely manner. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to preview our agenda, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Marissa. We've already done the welcome. We're going to do just a little bit of a catch-up, bit of a primer on textile EPR and SB 707, California's textile EPR law in particular. It may be a reminder for some. Thanks for bearing with us if you've seen this before. But then we'll get to some of and then additionally some more information about Textile Renewal Alliance for those who are newer to the organization. And then we'll get to a little bit of a deeper dive on how we've been preparing for the needs assessment, what to expect there, what is to come in the implementation process, and specifically next year with regard to rulemaking as well. And then we'll conclude with just a few pointers on how to stay engaged with us and leave, as we did last time, ample time for questions. So we'll hold questions until the end, probably, just to make sure we get through this. But we'll be reviewing the Q&A as they come in. So enter your questions as they occur to you. We're taking a note of what they are, and we'll try and raise all of those for discussion at the end. So with that, I think I'm turning it over to my colleague, Marissa Adler, to give us an introduction to SB 707 and textile EPR.
Great. Thanks so much, Olivia, and Rachel. Thanks for that great opener, setting the stage for today's webinar. My name is Marissa Adler, and I am part of the consulting team that's working with AAFA, CRA, and NRF to set up the Textile Renewal Alliance. We'll start off with a primer here on EPR, because I do see that we've got a lot of folks who are tuning in for the first time here. So just to get everybody on the same page, Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, is a policy approach that places financial and/or operational responsibility of the end-of-life management of designated product onto producers instead of onto municipalities, ratepayers, and taxpayers, which has been the traditional approach for our waste management in the U.S. EPR requires producers to fund the cost of collecting, reusing, and recycling covered products to make sure that they don't end up in landfill incineration or mismanaged in the environment to the extent possible. And California's textile EPR law, known as SB 707, focuses on consumer-facing textiles primarily, like apparel, footwear, home textiles, uniforms, health and hospitality textiles, etc., while prioritizing reuse, repair, and responsible end markets. And I'll note here that you can see a whole list of icons across the bottom. EPR for textiles is certainly not the first EPR law that we've got in the US or in California. Those are some examples of different product categories that are covered by EPR laws. Okay, you can go ahead to the next slide. So SB 707 is the first textile EPR program in North America, following its introduction by Senator Newman and its subsequent signing into law by Governor Newsom in 2024. The law obligates apparel and textile producers that sell into California or offer their products for sale into California to form a single not-for-profit PRO and to fund the responsible end-of-life management of apparel and textile products, which are described under the definition of covered products in the law. The PRO then, on behalf of those producers, is responsible for developing and implementing a program plan that meets the requirements of the law. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go forward. Go ahead to the next slide. So in terms of timeline here, you can see that while it looks like it's a kind of extended timeline, you see some requirements not hitting until 2032. There's a lot of interim requirements and milestones that producers have to comply with along the way. So the very first one is the formation of a PRO. And Textile Renewal Alliance, as Rachel and Olivia pointed out, is a prospective PRO. Will be applying to CalRecycle by the January 1st, 2026 deadline. And then by March 1st, 2026, CalRecycle will select a PRO to run the program in California. By July 1st, producers have to register with the PRO. Any obligated producer, according to the statute, is legally required to register with the selected PRO no later than July 1st, 2026. That's a short period of time there. So we're trying to do as much education as possible. Informal rulemaking also begins in 2026 and then turns into a more formal rulemaking process, according to CalRecycle, in about 2027. And rulemaking will continue through mid-2028 at the earliest. We'll talk a lot more about what the rulemaking process is. So I'll move on here to the next milestone, which is the needs assessment. March 1st, 2027, which is exactly 1 year after a PRO is selected, the PRO has to submit its final needs assessment report to CalRecycle. And we're also going to go into a lot of detail about the needs assessment here, but basically it's an analysis of the California landscape in terms of textile recovery activities and infrastructure, and then identifying the gaps that exist. In 2028, like I mentioned, that's the earliest that CalRecycle will adopt the regulations, and the regulations will help clarify a lot of the questions that we all have, either because the law was broad, either intentionally or unintentionally, and will help guide some of the program planning elements as well. Within 12 months of approving the regulations, the PRO has to submit a program plan to CalRecycle. And that program plan is basically the roadmap for what the EPR program in California is going to look like, how it's going to comply with the statute. By July 1st, 2030, July 1st, 2030 is the final deadline that CalRecycle, or that the PRO has to have a final approved plan. So the PRO will submit the plan within 12 months of regulatory adoption. Then CalRecycle can conditionally approve or disapprove it. But no later than July 1st, there has to be a final approved PRO, a final approved plan. And then upon approval of that plan, that's the mechanism that triggers producer fees. That's when producers have to start paying fees into the PRO. The PRO has about 12 months to implement the program fully. And then by 2032, March 1st, that's when the performance standards take effect. All right, you can go to the next slide. So if you're newer to the EPR ecosystem, apologies for those of you who have attended our last webinar, we covered this, but for those of you who are not as familiar or just need a little bit of a reminder about what the different roles and responsibilities within an EPR ecosystem is, this is what this diagram is showing. So starting in the middle here, you've got the PRO, the Producer Responsibility Organization. In this case, it's legally required, as I mentioned, to be a 501c3 nonprofit, and they play a central role in the EPR landscape. It's the operational arm that helps producers comply with their EPR obligations by managing the program that collects and responsibly manages covered products according to the law. So the PRO will develop a program plan. They're the ones who propose performance standards to CalRecycle, and they're the ones the PRO is the one who develops an equitable fee structure for covered products and complies with the mandatory reporting to the state oversight agency. Now, I will mention here, there's a pretty good checks and balance system here. So the PRO has to submit things to CalRecycle for approval, and CalRecycle, in a lot of instances, has the authority to either approve, reject, or conditionally approve and work with the PRO to get things like performance standards and program plans up to their expectations. So producers on the left-hand side are the obligated parties who fund the system, and those are the entities who are legally mandated to take responsibility for products after consumer use. So producers pay fees to the PRO according to the fee schedule that's set by the PRO. The producers are required to collect and report data to the PRO on covered products sold in or into California and meet any producer-specific performance targets that might be set by the PRO and the program plan. If you look towards the right-hand side, you'll see the service providers and local government. They're the ones who traditionally collect, sort, repair, repurpose, recycle covered products, and then report activities back to the PRO usually under some kind of a service contract or contracting agreement. And those service providers are reimbursed for eligible costs by the PRO. And then, of course, you have, in this case, CalRecycle serving as the state agency that has the authority to oversee SB 707. They're the enforcer. They'll develop the regulations. They'll enforce the law. They'll, clarify the law's intent and, issue any penalties or things like that need to be made. All right, and now back over to Olivia.
Great. Thanks so much, Marissa. And I think Rachel did a great job of setting the scene here. So we'll just give you a tiny bit more background on Textile Renewal Alliance and how the organization formed and what we've been working on this year. So again, as you heard from Rachel at the beginning, after SB 707 was signed into law, the members of the California Retailers Association, the American Apparel and Footwear Association, and the National Retail Federation expressed strong interest in embracing the requirement in that law that producers form a producer responsibility organization, or PRO. And they look to these three associations to act as conveners and collaborators and leaders in this effort. These associations have a unique opportunity and platform from which they can educate and engage prospective producers on their obligations, just given their memberships, their significant relationships and reach across the producer community, in addition to the on-the-ground experience with California's stewardship programs and relationships with others who are going to play a really critical role in enabling a textile EPR program's success. And that could be local governments, textile collectors, waste service providers, and more. Lots of different stakeholders in the system. The organization will be governed by producers as intended by law, but will be well positioned and resourced to service the entire producer community and guide them through imminent requirements, starting with that producer registration deadline of July 1st, which you saw in Marissa's timeline. Excuse me. Collectively, the governing board of this organization and these associations are representative of the diversity of companies and covered products that fall under SB 707. And they're really committed to working together and with others across the landscape to ensure that textiles are diverted from landfill, collected, repaired, reused, and or recycled after use, which is very much the intent of the law and will lead to more sustainable or circular outcomes. Next slide, please. Just to go a bit deeper here, I think we spoke to a lot of this, but the leadership of TRA and the team supporting TRA brings a California first perspective, local relationships, and direct experience, both participating in and building stewardship organizations or PROs, including in California. Additionally, some of the TRA advisors have worked in material management and textile circularity for decades, and their work has even included conducting prior evaluations of California's textile management programs. So starting from a really strong foundation here and looking to build upon that with some of the initial work in 2026, including the needs assessment, which Marissa is going to speak to in more depth. Beyond that, the producer leadership consists of companies that have supported, implemented large-scale collection networks. They've operated resale and donation partnerships. They've collaborated extensively across the textile management landscape, looking for opportunities to innovate, for practical solutions, and more sustainable outcomes. So I think the point there is just that there is deep knowledge here combined with a real desire to innovate on what has been tried and tested and to work with others to explore and scale approaches that are going to be right for the California system. Next slide, please. we recognize that there are a lot of states contemplating textile EPR at the moment, but we have California here with an enacted law, with a program that needs to be implemented, and there are a lot of eyes on California. And as Rachel said, there's an opportunity here to really build something that could be the gold standard for textile EPR, not just in the US, but globally. The structure and the governance that we have built for TRA is responsive to the requirements of the application, to the requirements of the law, and again, really grounded on this idea of a producer-led board that is diverse in terms of the products that are represented by those companies, as well as the inclusion of companies of a variety of sizes. And then again, continue to have the support and leadership and continuity from the associations that have that helped stand up this initiative, and again, have a real opportunity to help take the work farther, faster in 2026, thanks to their networks and producer relationships. Producers aside, we really recognize the importance of engaging the entire value chain, and that there are a lot of organizations that have been working in this space for quite some time and are quite excited to have additional collaborators and support and funding to scale what they're doing. So we created a formal body to advise the board on a regular basis. We're calling that our California Implementation Working Group. Last month, we put out a call for applications to this working group, got some really fantastic responses, and we're really looking forward to notifying organizations of our desire to work with them and give them seats on the California Implementation Working Group. Again, this is a non-producer group. It really is focused on those who are currently working in California or are very knowledgeable of the California textile and waste management landscape, and can continue to bring diverse perspectives and points of view to the work of the board. So really excited again about the response that we got to that application process, and looking forward to announcing the members of that implementation working group in the near future. Next slide, please. So again, you've heard a bit of this as we've been going, but it's been a very busy year. The association started their work and and formally established this organization mid-year. And we've been working and supporting them to map out all of the activities that are going to happen, not just in 2026, but over the next 5 years, given what we know now from the statute, from our experience in pro building, with certainly a lot of room for addition and incorporation of new information and developments. I think, a common theme here is that there's a lot of work that has been done, a lot of work that needs to get done, and we're really keen for producers and other stakeholders to start paying attention. But there are still a lot of unknowns and a lot of data and clarification that we're looking forward to getting through things like the needs assessment and the rulemaking process that Marissa will speak to you about shortly. But we have endeavored to sketch out the known activities and plan for those in what we call a startup plan, or a bit of a roadmap. We've had to formally establish the organization, incorporating the organization, preparing to file for 501c3 status. Obviously, we've spoken about governance and how we're structuring this organization today and for 2026, again, recognizing that there will be a lot more information that comes through, and learnings and experience that may lead us to continue to evolve that structure and the roles and responsibilities within the organization to be really responsive to what's happening on the ground and what California needs. Some of the other preliminary work that we did includes putting out a request for information, which is really more a request for expressions of interest in participating in an eventual needs assessment process. We were really keen to understand not just who would be interested in bidding to support the execution of a needs assessment, but who are the different collaborators and entities within the value chain that have information. We didn't ask for that information yet, but we asked for indication of their interest in providing it and what kind of data they had versus specific data, so that we can sort of start to build a bit of a robust database of who we should be working with moving forward to ensure an effective program. And we sent a request for information out to over 275 entities, got some great responses back, and have been using those to inform what will ultimately be a request for proposal to work on the needs assessment to be released if we are selected as the single pro for California by CalRecycle. And then a few of the other things that Rachel mentioned at the beginning, we have our external presence now, we have a website, we have a monthly newsletter. If you have not signed up for that, encourage you to do so. It, will continue to give you updates through that newsletter and invite you to webinars like this. We're active on LinkedIn as well. And then I think most importantly, continued one-on-one engagement through relationships that CRA and others have in California, but also in conversation with national organizations and presentations to trade associations and other groups whose constituents have a real interest and in some cases obligation under this textile EPR program. So if you are an entity that is interested in learning more or hearing from us directly, again, would encourage you to reach out. We're very keen to connect with as many potential collaborators and interested parties as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Marissa for a bit of a deeper dive on the needs assessment and rulemaking.
All right, wonderful. We can go ahead to the next slide. So I'll just go ahead and say it. There are a lot of unknowns at this point in time in terms of how the program is eventually going to be developed. But we do expect the needs assessment to shed some light on many of those answers in combination with the rulemaking process. So for those of you who aren't familiar, a needs assessment is a detailed evaluation of the existing systems and infrastructure, their costs, and identification of gaps and opportunities that are relevant to textiles collection and end-of-life management. Needs assessments have become common in EPR programs, and under 707, it's a requirement. The needs assessment will be commissioned by the PRO via, like Olivia said, an RFP or a request for proposals, and the execution of the needs assessment will be in close coordination with CalRecycle. I want to underscore here the importance of the needs assessment. It really is a critical step to collecting information about recovery systems that are available today, how they're performing, and what gaps need to be filled to meet the requirements of the law. It's a big project in a limited amount of time, but it's going to really help inform the development of the program itself. So if selected as a PRO, TRA intends to issue the RFP immediately upon selection and pursue a bit of an accelerated RFP process to bring on the consulting team that is best suited to carry out the needs assessment within the 12 months that we have to do it. I won't touch on the RFI process again because Olivia mentioned that, but that will, the responses and the interest and the contacts collected through that process is going to give that consulting team that is executing the needs assessment a running start in starting to research the different areas that are needed. So once released, we do expect the RFP to draw proposals from a bunch of different interested consulting firms. It covers a lot of different topics and areas of expertise. So just from personal experience, I expect there to be some collaborations of different consulting teams with different levels of expertise and areas of expertise coming together to bid on it. But that needs assessment will be carried out over the course of 2026. Compiling information from throughout the recovery value chain. There's going to be a lot of outreach to stakeholders and a lot of opportunity for folks to weigh in on the infrastructure that already exists today and how they think it should evolve or be changed into the future. So the needs assessment will culminate in a report that's due to CalRecycle, and the findings, of course, will inform the program development, which I mentioned earlier. That program plan is the blueprint that's developed by the PRO for the collection, transportation, repair, recycling, and otherwise safe and proper management of covered products. Okay, you can go to the next slide here. This is a bit of a visual to help folks understand the process of the needs assessment and the kinds of information that the needs assessment is going to be exploring. So it's going to take a methodological approach to evaluating the current recovery system in California. It's going to be looking at things like service availability, infrastructure capacity, gaps, market conditions, public education, and and very importantly, the financials of textile collection, reuse, repair, repurposing, and recycling. So through a variety of primary and secondary research, the needs assessment is expected to evaluate things like generation rates, recovery rates, material flows. There's a requirement in statute to look at material composition and fiber content, to look at things like PFAS and chemical contaminants and microfiber release. There will be an element of waste characterization analysis, an analysis of collection and processing infrastructure. We're going to have to look at economic and workforce impacts and the existence of and an evaluation of end markets and whether or not they meet that definition of responsible end markets, of which there isn't a clear definition yet. It's going to have to really look at relevant policy and regulatory frameworks that exists outside of or parallel to SB 707, whether that's at the local jurisdictional level or at the state level or at any level of government that could have an impact or an effect on the goals of the program itself. Consumer behavior is a really big one, so there will most likely be a consumer behavior study, an assessment of stakeholder perspectives across the board. We're going to be looking at what kind of innovations and technologies are available that could be deployed to help make a program effective and efficient. And then, like I said, very importantly, system costs. We really are going to need to drive down into what is the cost of a program, because that program cost is in turn going to be divided up into fees for producers. So SB 707 requires the needs assessment to be developed by the PRO, like I said, in consultation with CalRecycle and in consultation with a broad diversity of local jurisdictions, recycling service providers, and processors that reflect the different needs and challenges presented by managing different products through final disposition. So Olivia already mentioned the implementation working group that we're developing, and we expect that implementation working group to represent different aspects of the recovery value chain and help have a bit more of a formal role in guiding the development of the needs assessment and the execution of the needs assessment. Like I said, we also expect to solicit input and participation from a very broad range of stakeholders throughout the needs assessment process. And I'll just quickly touch on what we think the results are gonna look like, not like how the results are gonna look, but the types of results that we're aiming for as part of the needs assessment. And that's understanding the baseline of how textiles are currently generated, collected, managed, and disposed in California. So really having both a visual and sort of just a conceptual understanding of the system in California today and how robust it is and how well it's working. We'll have a map of infrastructure, including the collection systems and where they are and where the recycling pathways are, where the facilities are located, so that we can do a regional service gap analysis, overall service costs and system economics, including things like indirect costs like labor and indirect benefits, labor, transportation, jobs, processing, and market factors. We may be looking at the environmental and social impacts of these end-of-life pathways, because we're going to need to create a program that prioritizes the waste hierarchy, but also looks at some of those broader impacts systems-wide beyond just following the waste hierarchy. And there's some other elements also that will be really important to culminate into our final report. But that final report to CalRecycle is really going to provide a thorough analysis, but also a set of recommendations of how the PRO can then begin to put a program plan together that meets the intent of the statute. So once approved, the PRO will develop that program plan, and the needs assessment will also help inform quantifiable annual performance standards and 5-year performance standards, and it will be the basis for fee setting. You can go to the next slide. So like we said, by March 1st, 2027, the PRO will submit that initial needs assessment to CalRecycle. And I should note for anyone interested, the statute has a pretty exhaustive list of requirements for what the needs assessment needs to cover. So if you're interested in, understanding what that RFP that we're compiling might look like, there's a pretty good list of required tasks and requirements in the statute already. And then by May 30th, 2027 is when CalRecycle will approve and conditionally approve or disapprove of the needs assessment that gets submitted to them. And then starting in 2032, that 5-year kind of needs assessment process begins, where every 5 years we evaluate whether or not we need to do another needs assessment based on the degree of change that the ecosystem has undergone. All right, so, oh, sorry, yeah. We can go to the next slide. We'll talk about rulemaking here a little bit, and I want to be cognizant of time because I want to leave enough time for questions. But I also want to make sure we cover rulemaking because it's an important process. For those of you who may not be as familiar with sort of how the process works, first the law was passed, right? And the law itself is not overly prescriptive. It's more of a framework. And a lot of that is very intentional because it allows CalRecycle or whoever the regulatory agency might be under any given EPR law, in this case, CalRecycle, and the PRO, the flexibility in determining how the statutory requirements will be met. And that happens through the rulemaking process and the program plan development. But the benefit of not setting specifics in statute, like recovery rates or other performance standards, and instead, shifting those over to the rulemaking process allows those requirements to be more easily adjusted over time as the market responds and develops and matures, and other kind of real world things take place. That way you don't have to go back through a legislative process to change those performance standards. It's just a regulatory change. So the rulemaking process will create the regulations, which are rules, orders, and standards needed to implement, interpret, and make specific the law. And I took that from verbatim from one of CalRecycle's slides. I really liked the explanation of that. So as mentioned, rulemaking will clarify the elements of SB 707. It may be clarifying things like definition of producer, if there's a clarification that's warranted there. Covered product lists. I know that there's already some fringe products where, we're not totally sure if they'd be considered in or out. It'll clarify whether there are any exemptions, and other things that just need clarification from the statute itself. There is one specific requirement in statute for rulemaking, and that is, interestingly, to encourage recycling that minimizes the generation of hazardous waste, generation of greenhouse gases and environmental impacts, environmental justice impacts, and public health impacts. So we can expect the rulemaking process to clarify some of that, and I know that that's related to different recycling processes and the determination of that in the rulemaking will help the PRO determine which end-of-life pathways are acceptable under the law. The regs are also going to set procedures for enforcement and the assessment of penalties. CalRecycle is going to host public workshops. They're going to publish their draft regulations. They're going to hold formal comment periods to solicit feedback. There's a lot of different ways that anyone interested can get involved in the process. Textile Renewal Alliance will certainly be very closely involved in the process. But again, looking back at that timeline, the regs won't be finalized any earlier than July 2028. So we've got a whole process to go through. And I do want to stress here again that it is an important process to be involved in. This is where you can ask questions, submit comments, provide information that you might have. You can help, just elevate the education of the overall system and any specific concerns you have. And through doing that, you can influence the decisions that would inform important program aspects. So, okay, next slide here. I'll turn it back over to Olivia.
Thanks, Marissa. And I know everyone loves a timeline, and we flash that timeline up quickly, but rest assured you will get these slides afterwards. So we can go to the next slide, please. I'm just going to move us through our next steps here quickly so we can get to your questions. As I said before, there are things you can do to start preparing now. There are also a lot of unknowns and things that we need to watch for and be engaged in the rulemaking to be prepared to address, as Marissa just said. But certainly, if as a producer, one of the first things you can do is really spend some time with the statute. Work with your legal counterparts to try and map out where your obligations are. I already see some questions in the Q&A around exemptions and producer definitions, and we will do our best to guide on all of that. But ultimately, we cannot make that determination for you. That responsibility is on the producer to determine based on the statute where your obligations lie if you have them. Certainly, some of the producers that have felt like they got a head start on things like packaging EPR are the ones that really brought together cross-functional teams early and did some good internal education to make sure that everyone sort of understood the potential for the law to impact their part of the business and what information and importantly data might be required of them in the near future. I know there's some questions in the chat about data reporting and that timeline, so we'll take those in just a moment. But then like the real first obligation, aside from the obligation on all producers to form a pro, which is hopefully being taken care of for you here, is to register with whoever is approved by CalRecycle as the single pro by July 1st, 2026. So if that approved pro is us, we will certainly be doing a lot of education and notifications to make sure that message is getting out there and that folks understand the producer definitions to the best of our ability, their ability, and have an easy way to register. Similarly, I've been so thrilled by the engagement with across the stakeholder landscape and certainly from the service provider community. There will be many opportunities to collaborate with producers and with the pro, and so certainly staying engaged with us. Looking out for more information about participating in the needs assessment process and being an active participant in with CalRecycle and rulemaking, I think will serve you well. And then finally, this is by no means a requirement to continue to engage with us or receive our communications or educational materials, but if you feel that this is the right organization to be the single pro for California and implement SB 707, we would welcome your support. Formal support is great, much appreciated. Scanning this QR code, there's also, I believe, access to this on our website, does enable you to sort of fill out a form letter that then enables us to say you are among a list of companies or organizations that would be supportive of CalRecycle approving the application. So again, not a requirement, but certainly appreciated by us if you are confident in the direction that we are taking here. I think we've covered everything else. I don't think, do we have any other slides before Q&A, or should we jump right in? There we go.